Are you ready to see somebody's need for speed? I can put our wings in the wind faster than you could ever believe. Are you ready to rock? Fun that don't ever stop. We are on a crash course and freedom is running on as long as we want. Drive fast, let go. Hands up, wind blows. Soundtrack, stone cold. Sit back and turn it up, now here we go. Calling all my friends for a whole race. Revving up the engines, we ain't going nowhere slower. Fast cars and wild hearts, a better life. Heading to the top, you'll see us. Trying to be the best, no secret. Never touch the brakes to keep it. Fast cars and wild hearts, a better life. Are you ready?
Alright, welcome back to the Bonsai-En critique series. I hope you guys are all doing well. For those of you who are here in Australia and in our area, I hope you're not going crazy in lockdown like the rest of us right now. It's tough times, but hopefully we can all get past this and everything will open back up so you guys can continue visiting bonsai nurseries and getting more bonsai stock. For those of you who are interested in submitting a tree to this series, I've put the link in the chat. So just follow that link and you guys can submit your trees and we'll get around to them. We've still got quite a few more trees to get through. We're trying to get through about 5 an episode. So we've probably got at least another 4 or 5 episodes ahead of us before we reach our limit of the trees that we currently have. So keep submitting those trees in. I love seeing them. The other thing is too, with that link, if you follow that link, if you're interested, we're now offering one-on-one Zoom sessions with myself. So if you would like some personal information about your trees, then we can organise that. So that's the beauty of the internet these days and things like Zoom. You can walk me around your garden. We can have a look at some of your trees. You can ask for some design cues. Maybe you can, ask about the soil in your area, give me some information on what your climate's like, and we can do that kind of work. I have one other thing to let you guys know about too, which is I did a guest spot on a podcast last week. The podcast is called United We Ag, so United We AG. They're an agricultural podcast based out of America. We sat down and had a chat for about 2 hours and it was an absolutely fantastic conversation. Derek, who hosts the podcast, had his brother Jim there, who has just started out in bonsai. So he asked quite a lot of good questions. So jump on over to United We Ag and check out their podcast. You can find all the links to that podcast on their Instagram. So without any further ado, let's jump into this week's trees. We've got a few people in the chat here. Matt Australian says, morning Josh. Jack Taylor, morning Josh from South Florida. And Williams, hey Josh from SOCA, which, I don't know, is that Southern California, maybe? I'm not sure. Chris says his video is lagging a lot. Is everybody else's video okay? From what I can see here, stream is healthy. Stream health is excellent. So hopefully we should be okay for everybody else there. And I can see there too that Munchie Skateco says, Josh, can I ask you a question about olive trees? We might have to leave that for an email, or if you want to jump on the one-on-one Zoom sessions, we can sort that out. But we've got to get on with the stream here. So, William Goodwin has a thumbs up, so I'm guessing that means his is okay. Hello from Canada, video is good. Alright, sweet as. Let's jump on over to the first tree and see what we've got here. So, the first tree we've got here comes to us from Benjamin. And Benjamin is actually in Newcastle, so he's very close to where I am here. So unfortunately, that means that Benjamin is currently in lockdown. As I can see here, you've got a jade tree, and from the description that you gave me in the email, it says that you've taken this as a cutting from a larger tree, put some rooting hormone on it, and it seems to have struck. So when it comes to jade plants, I'm going to just straight up say that I don't have a lot of experience with them because, unpopular opinion, I don't really consider this a species for bonsai. But it doesn't mean you can't have a go at it and, give it your best shot. So what we're going to talk about here is just some design cues because, as I mentioned, I've never actually worked with these. At the last nursery I had, we actually had a garden bed that was absolutely full of these guys, and they were massive. And, I never touched them. From what I could tell, they were very, very soft and very malleable. You could move the branches very easily. You could move the whole tree very easily. So I'm not sure whether the branches will actually harden off on them and set if you wire them. Maybe somebody in the chat can correct me if anybody's ever worked with this type of species before. So basically, what I would say in terms of design cues for this, just how the tree's set out, I would probably go ahead and just cut this whole section off just here, and then I would try and wire this down into here and try and just shorten the tree up a little bit and have somewhat of a literati design and see what you can do with this foliage here, maybe wire it out a little bit. Once again, I'm not 100% sure on how these guys ramify. I'm not sure how they react to pruning and cutting and all that kind of stuff, and especially because I know these guys hold quite a lot of water in them, so I'm just not sure on maybe how much bleed out they would have in the active growing season. But that's basically all I can really say about this tree, is maybe wire it up and bring it down into this area here. When it comes to pot choice, the oval one that you've got it in is perfectly fine with the more rounded edges and stuff. I would have a look at your colour wheel and just see, have a look at the shade that you've got here on the colour wheel and look directly opposite of it, and that'll give you the colour that you should have. I can see in the chat here that William says that they can be wired and do set okay if there is not too much weight on the ends, and Jack also says you can wire jade trees no problem. So thanks for that, guys. Jumping in there and filling in for me, because this is one of those situations where I'm just not too sure. But thanks for sending that one in, Benjamin. I appreciate you sending that in, and if you've got any other trees in the future that you'd like to send in, maybe some Aussie natives or something like that, I'd be absolutely happy to take a look at those guys for you. We're going to move on to our next tree here, so let me just get this one aside and bring up the next one. So our next one here comes from Chris. I'll just bring his tree up over here. So Chris actually sent through, I think, about 4 or 5 trees. So I've chosen one of these trees. So it says, I'm from NY, so I'm guessing that's New York. And I just started this hobby 3 years ago. Wish I could have started earlier. He says this is his Chinese elm, his first tree I started with. Bought from Eastern Leaf, which is Jason Chan's place. Jason Chan is an absolute fantastic grower. You guys might have heard the podcast that I did with Jason quite a few years ago, and there may be another one coming up, so keep an eye out for that. I love this tree, yet to find elms that have great branch placement on them, like this one from top to bottom. I really hated the roots that were in the pot, so I did a ground layer and hoping that it takes. I want to start from scratch and work on the Nagari of this tree. Alrighty, so let me just see if I can bring this tree up again. Just for some reason it disappeared. Alright, let's jump over and have a look at this tree. So as you can see, what we've got here is a Chinese elm, and this is quite a good base to start with, actually. So I can see a few things that jump out at me straight away. It's good to see that you're still developing this tree and moving it forward. So let me just zoom in here a little bit. The first thing that I can see here is your first branch here that comes off the trunk. There's pretty much zero taper in it from where it leaves the tree out to the end. So what I would be doing is starting to get some taper in your branches, because your trunk that you've got here is developed quite well. Unless you want this like much larger, I would start concentrating on everything else on the tree rather than actually growing the trunk. Now, there's not much taper from the top to the bottom of this trunk, and you've got some great movement here, and then it kind of heads into somewhat of a straight section. So what I would look at doing with this tree is maybe cutting it on an angle just here and having this as your new leader and wiring this up. That way what you do is you continue on with your great movement here, and then you move out into some taper. If you were really game, you could cut down here and have this as your new leader and start going from here. That way your taper starts earlier, but it is an option to cut on an angle here. And as I mentioned last week on the ficus that we looked at, you really want to cut on an angle. You don't want to come across here and do a flat cut. You really want to cut that on an angle, because that does a few things. One, that stops water from pooling up on top of on the cut itself, so that minimizes the chance of rot and stuff. But a cut this size, you really want to be putting cut putty on it. I do know that if you go on Facebook and stuff like that, you'll see people out there saying that cut putties are a waste of time and a waste of money and cut paste and all this stuff, but they're really not. If you put cut putty on a big wound like that, you're really going to activate that wound to start healing really quickly, and it's going to heal a whole lot nicer. So I would be cutting it on an angle here, cut putty, start wiring this guy out here. You may have to, depending on how flexible this is, you may have to cut back and start from something smaller. And as mentioned before, I would be cutting back your first branch down here and starting to develop from something smaller that's closer in. And the good thing about Chinese elms is when you cut them, going into the spring season, they just grow like crazy. And you can get ramification in no time on these things. So you can get branch structure on a Chinese elm. You can get pretty good branch structure in a season. You can get great branch structure within 2 seasons. So that's basically what I'd be looking at in terms of that. Now, I know you did send me another photo over the top looking down into the soil surface, but there's not too much to look at there in the moment. I see you are starting to, try and get yourself a Nagari happening. So the great thing about Chinese elms also is they grow nice big thick roots, so you can go in and lay them out. You can even wire them. There's some that I just did here in the nursery at Bonsai-En where I got some of the bigger, thicker roots, brought them up to the surface, wired them out, laid them in the position that I wanted, kept the active growing tips down in the surface so they can stay nice and wet and moist and continue to grow and be viable. But that's, basically it for this tree. You've got some nice movement in there. But as I said, just for now, you're off to an absolutely fantastic start. The tree looks healthy. There's no concerns there with the tree's health. Give her a chop either here on an angle or here on an angle, because your main goal right now is going to be taper. Because once again, pretty much zero taper from here to here, pretty much the same size the whole way up, so you'd want to rectify that. This branch here, it does seem to me like this is a little bit thicker than this. So you may want to even get rid of this branch altogether, which is actually an option. Depending on how far this trunk goes down into the soil here, you may not want to have a branch this low on the tree. You may want to have your branch start here, but the only thing is that I'm going to say about this, and I'm going to bring up the quote-unquote rules here, which once again, they're not rules, they're guidelines. But we do know that if we follow those guidelines, we want our first branch to be on the outside of the first bend, which would be right here. And if we were to go with this as our first branch, this is our second bend, and it's also on the inside of it. You see, you would really want, in a perfect ideal world for this tree, this is where you want your first branch, right here, coming into this section. And then you've got your next branch here, but that's if this tree had, all that taper going on. So if you can get a bit of trunk happening here, so have your base maybe around about here, then this is a good first branch. Maybe look at feeding this tree up heavily in your next spring season. See how many buds you can get to pop from this tree. Given that this is a Chinese elm, this thing will just shoot buds everywhere, okay? So you may get a bud that comes out right here that you can take advantage of. And then you'll have, if you cut just here on your angle to get your trunk taper, you'll have a nice branch here, and then you've got a nice branch here. You can try and bring this one round a bit more for your background depth. You could probably get rid of this one, and then you can continue up here on your apex. And then when it comes time to pot this tree up, obviously you can look at a nice shallow, more of a feminine type pot, rounded edges for this tree, just because of the smoother bark, the really soft lines that it has. And once you wire this thing all out and get some branch structure happening, it'll really have that more feminine look to it. So, softer lines, probably more of an oval pot than a rectangle pot, and you should be good as gold. So, thanks for sending that tree in, Chris. Absolutely fantastic start for a Chinese elm there. There's not a real lot of critiquing I can do on that, because you're on the right path, you're letting that thing grow, you're still in development, so points for that. As I said, just cut on that angle, get that taper going in the trunk, just because there's not a lot of taper there in that trunk. So that is probably the number one thing I would start concentrating on straight away. I would do that cut, if you're wondering when to do that cut, I would do that in autumn. So if you are in New York, which I believe is what that NY stood for, if you're not in New York, I'm sorry, but in autumn, get that cut done, okay? Get some cut putty on it. Don't do it in winter. If you do it in winter, okay, let's just say you forget, and you do have to do it in winter, leave a fair size stub, because in winter, you're going to get a lot more dieback on that cut, and if you cut too close to that branch that you want to become your leader, it could die back into that branch and you'll kill that branch, okay? But autumn is your best time. So in autumn, give that guy a chop, still leave a little bit of a stub. Anytime we do big cuts like that, we still want to leave a little bit of a stub. That's like our, that's our fallback, that's our safety, okay? And once that all dies back, you can see it, then you can come back in and slowly just take that back, okay? We don't ever just want to cut straight up flush against a branch like that, because chances are if that dies back too far, you're going to lose that branch. And then, as I said, with that lower branch, cut it back to get some taper on that, and just see what you've got after your next growing season. As I said, Chinese elms, they grow like crazy. They shoot all over the trunk. You know, I've got corky bark elms out there at the moment in the nursery that they've just started shooting at the moment because we're coming into our spring season. And it's shot all over the trunk before it's shot all over the branches that are actually on the tree and established. So that's how crazy these things are. So you might actually get some very adventitious buds in those spots on those curves. But thank you so much for sending that tree in. And we'll move on to our next tree here and just see what we've got. So, our next tree here comes from Daniel, and unfortunately, Daniel, I cannot say your last name because if I read your thing here, I believe you're from Germany. And if I do try and say your last name, I'm going to absolutely butcher it, so I apologise for that. But just some information on the tree that Dan has sent in for us here. He says it is a European hawthorn, a Cretaceous, collected in Italy about 3 years ago. It's approximately 20 to 25 years old. Actual height is 28 centimetres. I think it is ready to be potted in a new container next season, March of 2022. So we'll bring this tree up here so we can have a look at it, and this one is quite a nice tree to start off with. So let's jump over to the tree here and have a look. So as you can see, this is the more classic style of hawthorn that we'll run into. And this is a fantastic little base of a tree to start from here. So you've got great movement lower down, which is going to save you a lot of work, and it's going to give you an absolutely fantastic base to start from. And then you've got some taper that starts to taper off up here to the top of the trunk, which is also fantastic. I just want to see if I can have a look through some of the other photos that you've sent through here. So this is the back. It looks like you've done a bit of a chop here to get that taper going up here, which is fantastic. You've done some wiring on some of these branches just here. This is the side view of the tree, and this must be the other side. That's the 4 photos that have been sent through. So we'll start with a few basic things from the front. So once again, as we do, we always start at the bottom and work our way to the top. So as you can see at the moment, there's really no Nagari or root base going on. Let me just see. Okay, so we can kind of see it better in this photo here. But this doesn't mean that this tree doesn't have any Nagari or root base. So you can start digging down a little bit into this tree and just scraping away some of this soil at the surface and just seeing if there is anything down here under the soil surface. Given that you said you collected this tree, you've probably seen if there was something there when you collected it. If there wasn't anything there when you collected it and it's been growing in this container for the last 3 years, there may well be something there now. So just dig away and have a look and see if there is anything down there that you can use as somewhat of a Nagari. And keep in mind when you're doing your Nagari, try and think ahead of a style that you'd like to have for this tree, because the reason I say that is if you were to repot this tree out on this angle like this, so bring this section down maybe to about here on an angle, then you could have a really windswept kind of design for this tree. And in that case, any roots that you find down here in the surface, and even this one that you've got here, you can extend this right out and have this as an elongated root, and then on this side you would have your short little compressed roots, okay? And that gives you a great start for a windswept design for your Nagari. But if you wanted to go for, say, an informal upright design, so say where you're bringing this apex back over to here, then you could just splay out your roots evenly and create a nice little Nagari like that. So just check out what you got under there. If there's something already there, see what extra work you can do to enhance that Nagari. If there's nothing there, see what roots you can bring up to the surface and lay out and just see what you got to work with there. So let's just go back to the front here and let's just talk as if you're going to make this as an informal upright tree. So as you can see, you do have your first branch here ready to go. Let me just look around the back here so I can see this branch a little bit more clearly. They're coming off the trunk there. Because what I'm looking at here is actually trying to get some taper for this particular branch. So it looks like you do actually have somewhat of a little smaller branch here that you may be able to cut back to and start that taper, because you don't want a whole heap of thickness running all the way out to the tip here. If you can kind of cut it back a little bit, then cut back to something that's smaller and get that taper going. But like I mentioned with the last tree, okay, so much like the last tree, this is also deciduous. And much like the last tree, you'll find that if you feed this thing up really heavily, you'll get some back budding across, behind your branch here, especially with all this growth here. So what I would be doing is feeding this tree up really heavily because it's still in development. So any, over elongation that we get, any large leaves that we get, we can rectify later when we go into refinement. So don't worry too much about that right now. So coming into your next growing season, and actually this is a good point to mention something very important. Autumn is your time to be feeding your tree really well for your spring growth, okay? So as a beginner, you may or may not hear people say, put a fertilizer on your tree in autumn that has no nitrogen in it. But what these people also don't say in that same sentence is if you're in a bonsai pot, if you're in refinement and you're really trying not to ruin your highly refined and highly ramified tree, okay? So, this is a little bit of a problem that we've got in bonsai sometimes where, people give out some information but they forget to give the second half of the information, and people get really confused about it and they say, well, I didn't fertilize my tree in autumn because, this person said not to or whatever. But in development, this type of tree, if you want really strong growth in spring to develop your tree, autumn is your time to really heavily fertilize, okay? Because your tree is going to store all that energy over winter. It's going to help it get through that winter dormancy period. And then when it wakes up in spring, it's going to have all that energy to just flush out with straight away. If you, especially with organic fertilizers, if you fertilize on the first day of spring, okay, 9 times out of 10, it's going to take 4 weeks for that fertilizer to even break down and start becoming useful to the tree. So you've missed 4 weeks already. So having that energy already built up in spring, in autumn, ready for spring, is your goal, okay? So feed this guy up well in autumn and then let it just grow out in spring and see what back budding you get. Because if you get back budding down here and you can get it, say, in this section here, say you can get a bud to pop right here, and then you let that guy grow and grow and grow, and then you can cut back to it, and then you can get some fantastic taper happening here, and then you can start building out a highly refined pad that ends about here, okay? So you don't want your branch starting your ramification here because you're going to end up right over here. You're going to be really elongated and stretched. So if you can get a bud to pop in here, let that grow, and a hot tip for that, let that bud grow right out before you cut back to it, okay? If you see a bud just popping here and then you cut all this off here, being a deciduous tree, you're probably going to have more chance of that bud actually continuing to grow But what you want to do is leave this growth on for now to give that bud more chance to grow, keep those resources flowing up into this branch, because all this foliage you got here will pull up all the resources into the branch, and given that your bud's here, it's going to get those resources first, it's going to take off. Once it takes off and it's strong enough to handle itself, kind of like this one you've got up the back here, then you can cut back to it and start that taper. Alright, so let's move up the tree a little bit more. So as we move up, as we've seen around the back, you've done a cut just here and you've done some taper off here, which is really good. You're 100% on the right track there. You've got a branch just here. So I would start wiring that down into this area somewhere. Okay, and given that this branch down here is already given your kind of roadmap, I want to say, for the rest of the branches on your tree moving forward. Because something that we really don't want to happen is, so see how this branch leaves the trunk and kind of goes up first, and then it starts to go down again. That's the kind of image we want to set for the rest of the branches along the tree. So you don't want a branch just here coming down and then this one going up, because you can see what that's going to do. That's going to look really funny. So with this branch here, wire it up first and then come down a little bit into this area. Don't wire it straight down and then come into this area. Have it go up from the shoulder and then down a little bit, and then start filling this area out here. And then I've seen that in our next photo here, you've got two branches just here and you've got one just here. I would say get rid of these two just here, because what you're going to end up doing is causing swelling in this area just here, okay? Because you've got this big branch here and then you've got another two here. I would take use of this branch just here, wire this guy, it's already going up, and then you can bring it down and bring it out into this area here. So what that'll do is that'll give you some background depth just here. So you're going to have your first branch here, you're going to have this branch come down into here, and then you're going to have some background depth here. And then as we move out here with our taper, you can start building your apex up into this area, okay? So this is a really fantastic start for informal upright tree. Informal upright meaning that you've got curves that move away from the trunk, but by the time you get to the top of the tree, you're going to be back over the top of your base, okay? Your formal upright would be just straight up and down. Your informal upright moves around and then the apex ends back up over the base. Or alternatively, you could have a windswept design or a slanting design. As I said, if you move this out onto an angle and then you have your apex finish out over here somewhere, that is another design option for this tree. But as you can see, you've got great bark happening. The tree looks healthy overall. You've got great growth. When you get the thorns on this tree, I wouldn't suggest cutting them off. That, to me, is a feature of this kind of tree. I would leave your thorns on. They're great for practicing wiring. So, wiring around all the thorns and stuff like that. But that's basically all the information I'm going to give you for this tree right now. You've got an absolute fantastic start. For the rest of the growth that you actually have on the tree right now, I would just say leave it for now in the areas that aren't going to cause swelling like this. For now, you can keep these guys on. Just keep an eye on this area, that it just doesn't get too much energy in it and then you cause a massive big knuckle here, because it's really close to the base and you really don't want to flare that out, because it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. So even this kind of growth that's just here, I would look at, removing that kind of thing. And as I said, just move some of this smaller branching now while you can. follow the same kind of concept that you've already got with this branch, because you're really not going to be able to move this. So up first and then down after. So up first, down after, and then the same with this branch up here, up first, down after, and then you can start maybe this guy, little guy just here, you can wire him out and plan for your apex to end out here and have even more taper. You know, you can cut back here later on and cause even more taper as you move out to here, and you're going to have a fantastic tree. So thanks once again for sending that tree in. That's a wonderful example of development stock pre-bonsai. If you can buy that kind of stuff from a nursery, 100% go for it, because that right there is an example of a fantastic start. You know, if you go out and you buy these smaller trees, you're in it for the long haul, okay? And there's nothing wrong, let me just point out, there's nothing wrong with buying smaller starter stock, because the advantage that you do have with smaller starter stock is you control that tree from day one. So you can control the shape of the trunk, you know, what design you want that tree to be. Say if you buy a little juniper, and you can start wiring that out to be a cascade straight away, a semi-cascade, slanting, windswept, literati, formal upright, informal upright. You've got control over the whole entire process. So that's the advantage of buying really small saplings and starter stock. But if you're walking through a nursery and you see something like that tree we just looked at, I mean, that's also a great start for a tree. And, you know, if you read our blog on how to purchase nursery stock, you'll see the things to look for. So that first movement in the trunk, taper, root base, you know, health of the tree, it's got no infections or pest disease or, pest, all over the tree, then, 100% buy something like that, because there's not a whole lot of work to go into that tree before it's a fantastic tree. You're probably looking at maybe another 4 or 5 years with that tree, and that thing could be in a bonsai pot in a show, turning heads in no time. So thanks once again for sending that tree in, Dan. Once again, apologies for me not being able to say your last name, but I would rather not say it than butcher it. So the next tree that we've got coming to us here is another Daniel Hansen. Let me just bring up what he sent to us here. So he says, G'day, this ficus, not sure which type, was a gift I received about 15 years ago and was purchased from Bonsai South Nursery in Sydney, where I live. All right, Bonsai South. Shout out to Leon Kwong there. Absolutely fantastic bonsai grower, has some fantastic bonsai stock. So if you guys are in the area, definitely head down and check out Leon's stock. At the moment, he is closed because of the lockdown, but once he opens back up, head on down and check it out. I have no problems recommending other bonsai nurseries to go and check out, because the more places you guys have to go and get trees, the more options you have, the better. So, yeah, go on down, check out Bonsai South there in Sydney. He says, I'm guessing the tree was about 5 to 10 years old when I received it. Not knowing anything about bonsai, for the first 10 years I did nothing but water it and gave it the odd trim until it started to struggle. At that point I started to watch YouTube videos and try to revive it, so I cut it right back. You can see the new regrowth at the top of the trunk. I've also repotted it and fed it with nitrosol, and the tree has come back to life and is around 400 mil high now. I've done a little bit of wiring, but I'm not sure what my next step is. When it starts to warm up this summer, I'm planning on another repotting, but I don't know if I should let it grow or cut it back. Any advice would be appreciated. Okay, so I can already tell there what happened, why it started to struggle. Let me just bring some photos of this tree up over here. So before I go to the tree, I just want to say that it was mentioned in there that for the first 10 years he really did nothing but water and give it the odd trim, and then it started to decline in health. So this is a classic example of a tree becoming too root bound in a pot and starting to struggle. So this is a good opportunity for me to, just give you guys a quick little information about repotting and why we do repotting and just some of the nuances within repotting. So basically, when we work on bonsai and we're in a bonsai pot, and even in development, okay, this can happen. So we walk this very fine line of restricting the root growth to keep that miniaturization of our tree, but also killing our tree, because what we find in bonsai, the bonsai pot is what allows us to keep our tree small, okay, and keep it miniature. If we were to take our tree out and put it in the ground, it would want to grow and be a big tree. But when we put it in the bonsai pot, we restrict that tree's root growth, and that's what keeps it small and slows that growth right down, okay? It suppresses that growth. That's why I can't stress enough that if you want to grow a tree and get a girthier trunk and a bigger tree, you need to put it in development, put it in a bigger growing pot, and really give those roots room to grow, because if those roots aren't growing and elongating and thickening, then your tree's not growing, elongating and thickening. Hence why we put it in the bonsai pot. We cut all the bigger roots off, keep the fine small roots, we let it become root bound, we get that smaller growth, okay? Now, that fine line I was talking about is, so things like junipers and pines, for example, we talk about a minimum of 5 years in a bonsai pot before we repot it, because we really want that growth to get restricted, and that's how we get, on those pines, we get those smaller internodes, we get those smaller needles, and let me just say straight away that it's also a combination of our soil type, and for pines with our decandling and what time we decandle and how we, roll off our fertilizer and everything. There's a lot that goes into it, but the bonsai pot is a part of that process, okay? So things like pines and junipers, we're looking at about a minimum of 5 years before we repot. But the longer we leave that tree in, the more it becomes root bound, and at the point the roots just stop growing because they can't no more, because they got no room, that's the point that your tree starts to struggle and your tree starts dying, okay? So while ever your roots are growing, your tree's growing, and while ever your tree's growing, it's living, okay? Whenever your roots aren't growing, your tree's not growing. And if your tree's not growing, it's dying. So just keep that in mind, and that's why we repot. So in this case, that's why the tree would have started to struggle, and then you've repotted it, and then it's taken off again because its roots are starting to grow, and now the tree's starting to grow again. So let's jump over to the tree and have a look and see what else we can talk about. Alrighty, so once again, I'm just going to straight up say I'm not a ficus expert by any means. I can see that Scott's in the chat right now, so Scott, you're the ficus man. Let me know what type of ficus this is. Looking at it, I'm going to take a guess and say it's a Port Jackson. I'm starting to learn a little bit about ficus here and there. There's so many different varieties of them, and the only two that I really have in my collection here are Benjamina and Tiger Bark. So doesn't matter, the horticulture is all the same, and styling cues and that anyway, so we can move on with this tree and have a look and see what we can do. So let's start from the bottom like we always do and work our way to the top. With your pot, okay, I would suggest maybe a glazed pot for this tree, okay? So our unglazed pots are more or less for our more rugged, masculine trees with a more barked up texture to them. And, you get some great colour on these trees. Scott's just said, yes, a Port Jackson or Moreton Bay, mate. Okay, thanks for clarifying that for me. But for the rest of this tree, you've got a few good things going for you, okay? So I would definitely say keep an oval type of pot. Okay, and by the time you continue working on this tree, I would say this is a good size, maybe a teensy bit bigger, but not too much bigger for this tree. Start working on seeing if you can get a little bit more root flare happening with this tree. So you've got some Nagari happening here. If you really wanted to, one thing that we can do with ficus is we can take this tree out of the bonsai pot, okay, and then plant it over a rock inside of a PVC pipe, or plant it over anything that's really not going to rot away with excessive watering, okay? And then what that actually does is allows the roots to grow out and over something such as a rock or whatever you may put in there, and they grow down the PVC pipe, okay? They're guided down and they thicken up, and then over time you can start taking a bit of soil out and letting those roots get exposed to the air and the sunlight and stuff like that, and they'll start creating a barky texture on the outside of the root, kind of like this. And then what you can do is actually do what we call a Nagari style, okay? So not Nabari, but Nagari with a G. And basically that's where the tree stands up on its root system. So when you take it out of that PVC pipe, you can remove the rock from out under it, and you'll actually have the tree standing up almost like on stilts, but on its own root system. So that's one option you can have for this tree, trying something out like that. The other option is you can, like I've mentioned before, dig around, have a look at what roots you can splay out into the pot, okay, and create a little bit more of a Nabari. But as we move up the tree, as you can see, you've got little bits of movement here or there. And then you've got your first branch here. So you can essentially wire this first branch out a little bit more out into here and create your first pad. And then as we move up into this section here, you're definitely going to have to make a decision here, because what you're going to end up with here is some swelling due to having a branch here, a branch here, and a branch here. So if this were my tree, I would probably go with this one here in the back, okay? So I would get rid of this one. And once again, when you do the cut here, cut on an angle, okay? So that'll give you some taper. And cover it up with some cut putty to allow some better healing there. Get rid of this one here as well. And then that will leave you with this branch here and then this one here. And then you've got this branch that's coming off here. You could wire this out into the back here, and this will give you some background depth to your design, because we know that when we design a tree, we don't want just left and right branches and an apex. We want left, back, right, okay? That's our classic kind of style and our base to jump off of. A lot of the more advanced people out there will say, you don't have to follow left, right, back, or left, back, right, whatever you want it to be. Okay, same thing. But it's a good base to start from, and what that gives us, if we start from that base, is a 3D design. It gives us a lot of foreground depth, background depth, and side-to-side depth. So it gives us a 3D tree. So if you spin it on a turntable, you'll have growth all around the tree. It looks really good. And when you're looking at it from the front, it gives you more of that depth to the tree. So you can really wire this out into the back here somewhere, and then as you move up the tree, you've got another little branch here, okay? That can be wired and fill this spot out here, replacing this branch. And then you can continue up into your apex here and, wire it out, get some more movement going in it, and start creating a really nice tree, okay? So that, there's not too much more to this tree. We can have a look at some of the other photos here. So this is a photo from the side, obviously. And then we've got around the back. So we can see more of this, branch that I'm saying to keep. And you can see where I'm saying to cut on an angle. And once again, leave yourself a little bit of a stub. Overcut it for now. Or undercut it, I should say, not overcut it. undercut it for now and leave a little bit more there. Watch to see how far it dies back, and then you can slowly over time take it back bit by bit until you get a nice seamless transition with your taper into this branch. And then, you know, you can continue this branch up into your apex and continue it on. You've got quite a nice little tree here, okay? So at the moment, you know, you were talking about health concerns originally. This tree looks very healthy at the moment. You've done a good job of bringing back the health into this tree. That nitrogen that you would have given it, the nitrosol, would have coloured it back up. Cutting the roots would have allowed you to, you know, put some more room in here for the tree to grow. And at this time, I would say keep it in the bonsai pot, okay? There's a lot of people that I do tell, you know, take it out of the bonsai pot, develop it on a little bit more, but for the size of this tree and for what it is, I would say just start working on your branch structure now within the bonsai pot. These things grow like crazy. The minute you cut them, they'll just shoot 100 new shoots off it. And, you know, you'll find that once you cut this off and this off, if you do it, you know, once again, disclaimer for these critique series, you don't have to do what I say. I'm just giving you guys suggestions of what I would do if this tree was in, you know, my hands. But you've got an absolute fantastic start of a tree here, and I reckon within 2 years you follow these design cues and continue, you know, cutting back. So you know, as I mentioned before, I've got my Benjamini here now, and I've been working on that tree for when did I buy it? I think I bought it in summer here. So let's just say I've been working on it for the best part of 6 months. And the first thing I did when I bought that tree was pretty much cut the whole entire apex off it, so I could get taper into the top of the tree and, you know, wide out some branches. But the minute I cut that thing, it just absolutely shot back crazy again. And I've been finding that you can actually build really well. So you can wire, say for this, for example, you can wire this out and then cut it back to your first set of leaves, and then it'll shoot again, and let it shoot out and thicken up a bit, and then cut back to your next set of leaves and wire them out, and so on and so forth. And you can basically follow that pattern over the whole entire tree with this ficus. So what I would say here is you've got a fantastic tree, mate. Keep up the good work. It's very healthy. And just to come back and recap, make a choice on those three branches that are up the top there, so you can avoid that swelling and the inverse taper. Where you cut that one off on the one side, cut it on an angle so you can start that taper off. Wire that first branch out just ever so slightly, just to get a little bit more, you know, out to the side with that branch. Cut it back, start your ramification. Once you get to a point of really refining your branches, okay, try and hold off on your nitrogen. So if you're feeding with nitrosol, I would say really knock that nitrosol off. Go back to an organic fertilizer, maybe make your own up, and try and get those nitrogen levels down nice and low, because that's going to be your best chance. You know, if you're going into inorganic substrate, plus you have low nitrogen and you're restricting your growth with the bonsai pot, that's going to be your best chance at getting those leaves nice and small and getting nice small internodes on your branches and ramification and everything like that. But you still want to have that nitrogen in your fertilizer just to keep that colour in the tree, because without it, your tree will start to suffer a little bit. But if you have small amounts of nitrogen, so if you keep your N value around 4, 5, something like that, that's probably your best bet. If you can only find something as low as 8, that's better than 10. So just see what you can find in terms of fertilizer. As I said, for now, I would suggest not fertilizing with the nitrosol anymore, because that is a very big hit of nitrogen straight to the root system. That's a liquid fertilizer. But fantastic start, and thanks for sending that tree in. That was great to look at, and challenges me as a bonsai artist, as somebody who's only just starting out with figs now, ficus. It's a good challenge for me to be able to look at those types of things and challenge myself and challenge you guys as viewers as well. So let's move on to our next tree here. This next tree is going to be a very interesting one, and I'm excited that this tree was sent in. So let me just bring up some information here. This next tree comes to us from Garth Larson. And if you're watching, Garth, thank you so much for resending those photos through last night. I'd only just noticed last minute because, I only start organising these photos into a folder just before, the day before the stream starts. So I don't really even look at the trees until I start the stream. I save them, but I don't really look into them because I like to give you guys a look into my thought process and how I think when I'm looking at a tree. And if I start off by writing notes down and stuff like that, you guys really don't get that. So, what Garth sent here, he did send a really big write-up on himself. So just to roughly go over it, he started in the early 90s with bonsai. He did some travelling around with the military. He had to give some of his trees to his parents, let them look after him. He had some maples. The maples didn't make it, which is a pretty common thing. Maples are a very touchy species, especially with warm winds and things like that. He also had a ficus that got up-potted and just let to grow, and it just went crazy and got way too big and out of control. But this juniper we're about to look at has survived the whole thing. And I think from memory, he said he got it back in 2008. He said that he's only just starting to have the time now to retire and dig into bonsai and really get serious about it. He said that he feels like he's got more knowledge than actual experience, hands-on experience. So let's have a look at some of the details of the tree. So he says it's a juniper, cannot remember the exact species. Looking at it, it looks to be Shimpaku. A really nice one at that. Roughly 25 years old, only repotted once since the early 2000s, 5-gallon pot. Fell and somewhat cracked last year. I took the whole thing and dropped it into the current 15-gallon container. Never wired, some pruning over the years. Soil still drains well, never fertilised until last month. Just cleaned her up. Height is 28 centimetres from the top of the soil, 61 centimetres wide from end to end, and the trunk is roughly 11 centimetres. Tree has been in Southern California his whole life, currently in San Diego. Line in pot is just reference I use for rotating trees for full sun exposure. And then he said, I've made more mistakes than I can count with this tree, and I know it could have been a magnificent piece by now. However, we are both here alive at least. My goal is to get it for its first styling and repot this spring. I am on the fence about my next steps and would love to hear your take. I am split between styling and repotting into a shallower yet larger pot, and hopefully continue the development process or repot and start the reduction process in order to try some refinement in 2 to 3 years, of course. My biggest worry is it all going to shit after all these years. Truly appreciate your insight and totally understand if you cannot get to this. Alright, so let's have a look at this tree. I'm excited for this one because when I moved it over last night into the folder, this is quite interesting and you guys will get a kick out of this one. Alrighty, so as you can see, we have what appears to be a Shimpaku Juniper here. And this is the kind of tree that most people would walk past in a nursery and kind of look at and go, I can't do anything with that. The trunk's too straight, it's sideways. You know, all the different things that are going on there that just doesn't make it look like an instant bonsai straight away. But to me, I see something very interesting, and some of you guys out there might be already seeing something interesting in this tree. So let's just have a flick through some of the other photos provided here. As you can see, you've got a very straight trunk that comes out this way. Some interesting branching here that twists around and does all kinds of things. And then I believe there's another photo here up underneath the tree. So you can see there is some natural branching that's taken place because, you know, as Garth mentioned, he hasn't wired this tree or done any significant work to it. But let's go back to the front and talk about for a minute what I see in this tree. So, the first thing I would actually do with this tree is stand it up on an angle, okay? I would repot this on an angle because you've got a very good... sorry, I got the hiccups there. You've got a very good opportunity for a bunjin tree here, okay? So if we were to stand this guy up, we might be able to actually get what's called a bunjin style going, and I might actually, for the first time on this stream, I might just see if I can bring up my Photoshop and put the tree in there and see if we can actually just rotate it and see what we can get going on. So just give me a minute to open Photoshop up here. But you'll be able to see, I'll be able to draw around the tree here and, you know, get a better idea of what we can do. And given that this tree's been pot grown for so long, I'll just come back to me for a second while I sort this Photoshop out for you guys. But given that this tree's been grown so long, it's got excellent bark characteristics. And where's the tree here? We'll open this up. Alright, so we'll come back to the Photoshop here. So, as I mentioned, it's got great bark characteristics. And let me just unlock this here. Layer, yep. And then edit, transform, and we can rotate. Alrighty, so if we had the tree, let's say more or less like this, okay? Now you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit here. But this is how I would replant this tree on this angle, because what this gives us the opportunity for here is a bunjin style tree. Now if it wasn't for this branch here, I wouldn't say bunjin. If this branch was completely gone, I would say literati, and we would start working from here and we'd create an apex here and maybe an apex here, sorry, and maybe it just, you know, a little set of pads here, so maybe one here, and one here. And then you would have that classic literati style tree. But given we've got this branch that comes all the way down, it follows the trunk back down here, and then, you know, terminates down here. What you can actually do is, if you want to go in, and I'm going to address one of the concerns that you had about, you know, repotting and all that kind of stuff. You can come in here now, and all these little branches that you got in here, you can come in and start wiring them out. So you can get this little branch here and wire that up and try and bring it into here and try and get this foliage into a pad just here, okay? Get these tips up towards the sunlight. Now, I'm not sure. Let me just have a look at the photos that you've sent through. Just trying to see what's up under here and how thick this stuff is and how hard it will be to bend. Some of it looks like it's going to be very easy to wire out and bend. But what I'm going to actually suggest to you, okay, because I know that you're worried that this is going to go to shit after all these years of having this tree and, you know, growing it for the time that you've had, the absolute safest way you can do this is wait until your autumn period, okay? So wait till this tree moves into its vascular growth. So don't do this in, you know, spring or summer, because that's your vegetative growth. That's when your tree is going to be putting on lots of foliage, and it's going to be moving lots of resources, and there's more chance you're going to damage the tree in that process, okay? So late summer, early autumn, you're going to look at doing your wiring for this tree, okay? So if you're in the United States, you're probably coming up on that time now, okay? You're going to be in your last month of summer right now, and you're going to be moving into autumn. So very close to doing this work. So right now, what you can do is you can go through and clean out all your interior growth, which it looks like you've already actually done that. So you might not have to, but clean out all your smaller branches where you're going to be putting wire on, because it'll just make your wiring process easier for this tree. Okay? And then in autumn, for your thicker branches that you're more worried about, you can purchase some raffia and check out some tutorials on how to work with raffia and put it on. For our intermediate masterclass students, you guys would have learnt raffia in that last lesson. Andrew went through and taught you guys, you know, how many strands, how to set them up, how to, you know, wet them, put them on with pressure, how to tie them off, how to, you know, kind of connect two bits of raffia together if you've got a really long branch. So you guys are already ahead of the curve when it comes to the raffia. But for the thicker pieces that you're more concerned about, you can put some raffia over them. Do your bending in autumn, which is going to allow you more freedom for the bigger bends. It's going to be less damage, less stressful on the tree. And try and get this pad set up, you know, kind of out this way a little bit. You can continue going down on an angle like this and out, which is probably what you're going to want to do. So as you get to here or here, don't just bring this through and cause an L shape and put your pad here. Gently wire it out and bring it down this way, okay? And then you can set pads as you go down. Because much like a cascading tree, you're going to want this to get sunlight all in here. And then same thing up here. Start wiring these out, okay? So you can have this guy down the bottom here somewhere. Start wiring this out to a pad. And then you've got all this material right here to start an apex with, okay? And let me just get my paintbrush tool here. Maybe I can do this in red as a brighter colour. So, as I said, with your branch structure here, kind of come more down this way, alright? And then you can start like a pad like that, and then you can have a pad like that, and you can either maybe have something down in here like this. Just depends on what material you've got to work with here. And then you can have a little pad up the back here like that. Make sure you try to, you know, space everything out. And then as we move up into here, so let me just draw out your trunk line too. So you're going to have this, and it's going to come down into here. Alright, so that's good for this style of tree, your bunjin. I can also see you've got something here as well. I've just noticed that. So you might be able to bring that up as, you know, into this gap here and have that be this pad. Alright, and then you split off into here. And then you can wire this up into here and have, you know, a pad out into here. And then this guy up here, you can have a pad there. And then you've got some smaller stuff here where you can create a pad up in here. Alright. Don't forget your background stuff as well as your foreground stuff. So you can wire something out into the background, out into there. And then for your apex, we're going to want something that kind of comes out into here like this as your asymmetrical design, okay? So maybe try and move this stuff into here, and then any of this stuff that you've got here, you can bring out into this little gap out into here. And then when it comes time to potting this tree up, so now that we've talked a little bit about the design, okay, and I hope I hope I've covered it fairly well for you, because, you know, one of the difficulties of doing these critiques online, I can't really dig my hands in there and move stuff and see how malleable it is and actually see every branch and where you can put stuff, but that's just a basic design for now. So once you do this work, okay, I would pot it back up into this growing container that you've got here, okay? And what I would do, just try and slip pot it the best you can. So what I mean by slip pot is take it out and turn the tree on the angle, on this angle here, and put it back into the pot. And then because what you're essentially going to have is a root system out the side like this, okay? And you're going to be trying to put it back into a pot like this, okay? So what you're going to have to do is all these little roots here, you're going to have to tease them out and try and tease them down into this side of the pot. And then try and keep everything else kind of as a solid root ball. So I hope that makes sense to you, what I've just done there. Forgive me if it doesn't make sense. What have I got going on here? Trying to take this drawing stuff away that I've just done. For some reason it's not going away. Oh, we're just going to have to keep that there for now. I might change the colour, because the next thing I wanted to suggest to you is that when it comes to potting this tree up, okay, so after you do all those big major bends, you're not going to want to put it straight into a bonsai pot. So you're going to want to let the tree recover a little bit. So what I'm going to suggest to you is do this in autumn, and then what you're going to find is even by the end of autumn, you're going to get some more growth on this tree, okay? If it's in this container, it's really, really healthy. Fertilise really well through autumn, like I suggested before. And then by the end of autumn, this is going to be your sign. By the end of autumn, if you've had a little bit more growth on this tree, you've got nice green, fresh growing tips, then that's your cue in spring. You're going to do a repot on this tree, okay? Because at the moment, all we're really doing is some heavy bending work. We wouldn't want to do the heavy bending work and root work at the same time, okay? So you wouldn't want to do both these things in spring. So we want to do, coming up in autumn, we want to do this design work. And then give the tree, it's 8 weeks, okay? So if you do this at the start of autumn, give the tree 8 weeks, so 2 months. And then by the 3rd week in autumn, you're going to know if you've broken any branches or anything's died off during that thing, because it'll start to brown off in that section. So you'll know what you've got to work with then. If all the branches survive after the wiring, and then at the end of autumn you've got little fresh green growing tips, which you probably will have by then that's your sign that coming spring you can pot this tree up. If you don't have that, I would let it grow through the next spring. Just look after it in summer, clean the interiors out, let it go through the next autumn, and then into the next spring after that, I would repot it. But I'm going to say that really all you're going to be doing in autumn is doing some bending on this tree. It's not going to affect the tree too much. So get that done, give it the 8 weeks, see if anything's died off. If you've got some new growth, then in spring, I would definitely suggest putting this tree into a round pot, okay, just because of the long elongated nature of it. And if you want to go for the real classic Japanese design, find yourself a drum pot, meaning, you know, those pots out there, you would have seen them. My mouse just got stuck on the table, that's why I've done that little wonky bit there. Let me start that again. So say if you've got your little round pot like this, and you'll see it's got like the dots around the middle of it. and it'll be an unglazed pot. That would suit this tree really quite well. Geez, Photoshop's really not letting me take stuff away today. So that'll suit this tree really quite well. Other than that, you could get a handmade unglazed pot from an artist that you enjoy. They're from in the United States or overseas. But that's basically what I would do to this tree from now on. And you've got a really, really interesting tree here. So kudos for keeping it alive for all those years. And, you know, this tree's been through quite a lot. You've got some nice foliage on there. You've got some nice bark. You've got that fantastic branch here that we can use as a bunjin style type of tree. And you're really off to the races with a great start. I'm going to say, I wish this was my tree. I really do, because you've got some great opportunity here for a tree. And I would say that, you know, you do this work this autumn into a bonsai pot in the coming spring, if all is well with the tree. And I would say another 2 or 3 years of some fine detail wiring work and some pruning and cleaning up. This tree could be in a show easy as, and it'll be turning heads and getting people talking about this tree. Let me get rid of this Photoshop just here. But as you can see, that's what we started with. We rotate it. And you can see all that, you know, awesome stuff that you've got happening up under here that you can utilize as an apex and get that padding going on there. So, once again, thank you for sending that tree in, Garth. I really appreciate you resending those photos through last night, because as soon as I seen this tree when I was going through all the submissions, I was like, man, this is going to be a great tree to, you know, look at and talk about and work on. I would love to see this tree, like 100% email me photos after you've done the work on this tree. I would love to see it. And, you know, see what you've done. If you're super worried about the work as you're doing it, I put the link in the description of the video here, and videos moving forward. Jump on one of those one-on-one Zoom sessions with me. They're only $20 for half an hour of my time. If you're about to do the work, jump on one of those Zoom sessions and I'll talk you through it. We can talk one-on-one about, you know, what you might want to do, if there's something here that you need clarified. And same for everybody else out there. So if something you need clarified, or you want me to look at your tree one-on-one with you, jump on one of those Zoom sessions. As I said, it's going to be the cheapest one-on-one bonsai session around. Even if you guys want to have one a week and start learning from me personally, how you use that 30 minutes is up to you, even if you want to jump on and talk some bonsai. But that's all the trees that I'm going to go through today. We've seen some fantastic trees, from older trees to smaller trees. Once again, this is the thing that I love about these critique series, is that, you know, we can look at everything from beginner trees to more established trees to trees that, you know, are really odd, like that last juniper, but have so much potential about them. And that's one of the things that we try to teach here at Bonsai-En, is we try to teach you guys those guidelines, you know, not the rules, but the guidelines, because when you look at a tree like that, you can see everything straight away. You can see, you know, straight away, I think about the angle and, you know, where all the foliage should sit on the tree, and it just gives you that great design base to start from. So that's it for today. I really hope you guys enjoyed this stream. Thank you for joining me once again here at Bonsai-En for our critique series. As mentioned, links in the description if you guys want to submit your trees for one of our upcoming episodes of this. As always, leave in the comments what you thought of the stream, what you thought of the trees. If there's any improvements that you think I can make, I'm always opened up to hearing those improvements. But until next time, I hope you guys enjoy your bonsai journey. And once again, I'm Josh from Bonsai-En, and thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys later.